September 26, 1983. One man, one decision. 5 minutes to decide the fate of humanity. Welcome to Guardians of Ancient Legacy, where we uncover the extraordinary stories of ordinary people who changed humanity forever. Today's story will shake you to your core. It's about a night when the world stood on the edge of annihilation, and one man's gut feeling was all that stood between humanity and extinction. Picture this. It's just past midnight. You're deep underground in a military bunker. Suddenly, every alarm in the facility explodes to life. Sirens wail. Red lights strobe across the walls. Your computer screen flashes one word in blood-red letters. Launch enemy nuclear missiles are heading toward your country. Your orders are crystal clear. Pick up the phone and report the attack. In minutes, your leaders will launch thousands of nuclear weapons. In response, the entire world will burn. Everyone is screaming at you to make the call. Your training demands it. The computer insists on it. You have 30 seconds to decide, do you trust the system or do you trust yourself? This isn't a movie. This actually happened. September 26, 1983. And the man who faced this impossible choice is the only reason you're alive to hear this story. His name was Stanislav Petrov. And on one September night, he held the fate of 8 billion people in his hands. But before we get to that moment, you need to feel what the world was like in 1983. The Cold War wasn't just a political standoff. It was a constant state of terror that hung over every human being on the planet like a sword suspended by a thread. America and the Soviet Union had spent decades building weapons of unimaginable destruction, thousands of nuclear warheads, each one capable of vaporizing an entire city in a microsecond. Both superpowers had enough firepower to end human civilization several times over. And both sides lived in absolute paranoia. They'd built elaborate networks of satellites and radar systems, constantly scanning the skies, watching for any sign that the other side had launched their missiles. Because in nuclear war, speed is everything. From the moment a missile launches to the moment it strikes could be as little as 25 minutes. That's not enough time for phone calls or negotiations or second thoughts. That's barely enough time to verify what you're seeing and give the order to fire back. So both sides developed a strategy with a name that told you everything about how insane it was. Mutually Assured Destruction, MAD. The logic was simple and horrifying. If you attack us, we'll attack you, and everyone dies. The theory was that this suicide pact would prevent war because no rational leader would choose extinction. But that theory had a fatal flaw. It assumed humans were always rational. It assumed systems never failed. It assumed there would never be accidents or mistakes or technical glitches that looked exactly like an attack. On September 26, 1983, that assumption almost killed everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was 44 years old that night. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was filling in for a colleague, taking a shift at Serpukhov 15, a secret Soviet command bunker buried deep in the forests outside Moscow. This facility was the nerve center of the Soviet Union's early warning system, where officers monitored satellite feeds 24 hours a day, watching for American missiles. Petrov wasn't your typical military officer. He was a systems analyst, an engineer who understood how computers and satellites actually worked. He knew their capabilities, but more importantly, he knew their limitations. He knew the ways they could malfunction, the ways they could be fooled. This technical knowledge, this engineer's skepticism, would turn out to be the thin thread that saved the world. The shift started normally. Petrov took his position at the command console, surrounded by glowing screens and the quiet hum of electronics. It was just past midnight. The bunker was quiet. Everything seemed routine. Then, at exactly 12:15 a.m., the routine shattered. It started with a sound, a piercing electronic shriek that cut through the silence like a scream. Then another alarm joined it. Then another. Within seconds, the entire command center was drowning in overlapping warnings. Red lights erupted across every console. Officers leaped to their feet, and on the main display screen, the screen Petrov had been watching, 3 words appeared in letters that seemed to burn. Missile attack warning. The computer was certain one American intercontinental ballistic missile had launched and was heading toward Soviet territory. The trajectory was calculated. The target was identified. This was not a drill, this was not a test. According to the most sophisticated early warning system ever built, World War III had just begun. Petrov's training kicked in automatically. His hand reached for the red telephone on his console, the direct line to Soviet military command. This was the moment the entire system was designed for. The protocol was absolutely clear. Report the launch immediately. Soviet leaders would then have maybe 15 minutes to decide whether to launch their entire nuclear arsenal before American warheads destroyed their ability to respond. Every second of delay reduced their options, increased the danger, pushed them closer to being caught defenseless. His superior officers were already shouting, "Report it! Now! Call command!" The room was controlled chaos, everyone following the procedures they'd drilled 1,000 times. But Petrov's hand hovered over the phone. His mind, even in that moment of pure adrenaline and terror, was processing the data like the engineer he was. One missile. The screen showed 1 missile. And something about that single piece of information didn't make sense. His lips moved, almost unconsciously, as he asked the question out loud. Why would they launch just 1? If America had decided to start World War III, if they'd made the apocalyptic choice to attack the Soviet Union, they wouldn't send 1 missile. They'd send everything. Hundreds of missiles, maybe thousands, an overwhelming first strike designed to cripple Soviet military capability before they could respond. 1 missile wasn't an attack. 1 missile was either a test gone wrong or an accident, or the system was malfunctioning. His commander appeared at his shoulder, face pale with urgency. "Petrov, you're wasting time. Report the launch." But before Petrov could respond, the alarms shrieked again. Another missile detected, then another. The display updated. 5 missiles total, all inbound toward Soviet territory. For everyone else in that bunker, 5 missiles confirmed the attack was real. The numbers were growing. This was exactly the kind of escalating threat that demanded immediate response. But for Petrov, 5 missiles only strengthened his doubt, because 5 still wasn't enough. America had thousands of nuclear weapons. If this was really the beginning of the end, why only 5? It violated every principle of nuclear strategy. It didn't match the doctrine. It didn't make sense. "It's a false alarm," Petrov said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The room went silent except for the continuing wail of sirens. Officers stared at him in disbelief. His commander's face went from pale to red. "What did you just say?" Petrov met his eyes, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "It's a false alarm. The system is wrong." The commander exploded. "You're betting the entire Soviet Union on your personal opinion? Against what the computer is showing?" And Petrov, knowing his career was probably ending in that moment, knowing that if he was wrong he'd be remembered as the greatest traitor in history, replied with 3 words. "Yes, I am." What happened next was the longest 23 minutes in human history. That's how long it takes for an intercontinental ballistic missile to travel from the United States to the Soviet Union. If Petrov was wrong, if those missiles were real, then in 23 minutes the first nuclear warhead would detonate over a Soviet city. And because Petrov hadn't reported it, because he delayed the response, Soviet leadership wouldn't have time to launch their weapons before command centers were destroyed. Millions would die. The Soviet Union would be defenseless. And it would all be Petrov's fault. Nobody in that bunker moved. Nobody spoke. They just watched the clock tick down. Second by agonizing second, Petrov sat at his console, outwardly calm, But inside his mind was screaming through every possibility. What if he'd missed something? What if this was real? What if he'd just doomed his entire country? The weight of that uncertainty was crushing. But beneath it all was a certainty he couldn't explain and couldn't abandon. The data didn't make sense. Something was broken in the system, not broken in reality. He was right. He had to be right. 23 minutes passed, then 24, then 25. No explosions, no flashes on the horizon, no radiation alarms, no impacts, nothing. The room slowly began to realize what had happened. Petrov was right. It was a false alarm. The investigation would later reveal the cause. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds had created heat signatures that the satellite sensors mistook for missile launches. A software error combined with unusual atmospheric conditions. A glitch. A stupid, simple, almost mundane technical failure that had nearly ended the world. But here's what you need to understand. If Petrov had followed protocol, if he'd made that phone call, Soviet leadership would have launched everything within 10 minutes. 3,000 nuclear warheads arcing toward America and NATO countries. The United States would have detected those launches immediately. The president would have been woken with the news that Soviet missiles were inbound. With maybe 15 minutes before communications were destroyed, facing what looked like an extinction-level attack, America would have launched everything in response. Within 1 hour, every major city in the Northern Hemisphere would have been hit multiple times. 500 million dead in the first day. The fires would have been so massive they'd create their own weather patterns, sending smoke and ash into the upper atmosphere, blocking the sun for years. Nuclear winter global temperatures plummeting. Crops failing worldwide. Billions more dying slowly from starvation. Human civilization erased in an afternoon because of a computer glitch. All of that was prevented by one man's decision to question what the machine was telling him. But saving the world didn't make Petrov a hero. The Soviet military was humiliated. Their expensive, sophisticated early warning system had failed catastrophically. Someone needed to be blamed. Petrov was interrogated, reprimanded, and quietly shuffled aside. His career stalled. No medal, no promotion, no recognition. The entire incident was classified at the highest level. He was ordered never to speak of it. And Petrov went back to ordinary life, retiring to a small apartment, living modestly on his pension, never telling anyone about the night he saved 8 billion people. The world continued, completely unaware. People woke up on September 27, 1983, and went about their lives. Children played. Couples fell in love. Scientists made discoveries. Artists created beauty. None of them knew they'd almost ceased to exist the night before. None of them knew their survival depended on one man's gut feeling overruling a computer. For 15 years, Stanislav Petrov's story remained buried in classified files. But in 1998, after the Cold War ended, a researcher discovered documents about the September 26th incident. He tracked down Petrov and asked him to tell his story. And finally, the world learned about the man who saved it. The reaction was immediate and global. "The man who saved the world," the headlines proclaimed. In 2004, Petrov was honored at the United Nations. In 2006, he received the World Citizen Award. Documentary filmmakers sought him out. Journalists requested interviews. He was finally celebrated as the hero he'd always been but never been acknowledged as. Yet, when you watch those interviews, what's striking is Petrov's humility. He'd wave off praise, insist he was just doing his job. When asked how he'd found the courage to disobey orders, he gave an answer that reveals everything. "I didn't want to be the man who started World War III over a malfunction. I had a funny feeling in my gut, and I trusted that more than I trusted the machine." That funny feeling saved humanity. Not advanced technology, not sophisticated procedures, just human intuition, the ability to sense when something doesn't fit, When the story the data tells doesn't match the deeper patterns that experience teaches us to recognize, Stanislav Petrov died on May 19, 2017, at age 77. His death was so quiet the world didn't learn about it for months. No state funeral, no global mourning, just a small burial in a Russian town. But because of his decision, 8 billion people owe their existence to a decision most have never heard of. Stanislav Petrov made one choice. He looked at data saying the world was ending and decided it probably wasn't one man. One decision. 5 minutes that changed everything. And because of that, humanity got another chance. We got 40 more years and counting. Every breath you take, every dream you chase, every person you love exists because Stanislav Petrov trusted his humanity over the machine. That's why he's a guardian of ancient legacy. He ensured there would be a legacy at all. This story needs to be remembered. Share it. Tell everyone. Like this video if you're grateful to be alive. Subscribe if you believe these stories matter. Comment below, what decision in your life do you wish you'd questioned more? Next week, the nurse who refused to follow orders and saved millions. Remember, one decision can change everything.